guys, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to ASMR. Let's find a quiet spot, get your headphones in, and together we'll dive into a world of whispers and chills. I don't like babysitting anymore, not after what happened with Grace. I'd been babysitting her for about 6 months, every Thursday night while her mum worked the late shift. Grace was a sweet kid, quiet, a little shy, always staring at things that weren't there. I figured it was just her imagination, until that night. It was the middle of January, and a storm had rolled in, heavy rain and wind that shook the windows. Grace and I were in the living room, her on the couch, me flipping through channels. She was sitting perfectly still, eyes fixed on the window. I didn't think much of it until I glanced over and saw her expression. She was pale, her lips slightly parted, her hands clutching the edge of the couch cushion. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, staring into the night. "Grace," I said, muting the TV. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer, didn't even blink, just kept staring out of the window. I followed her gaze. All I could see was the street, the empty sidewalk, and the street lamp swaying in the wind, nothing else. "There's nothing out there, Grace," I said, forcing a smile. "Probably just the rain." Grace's voice was flat, hollow. "He's there." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "Who?" "The man," she said, eyes still locked on the window. "He's smiling at me." I squinted, straining to see through the rain. There was no one there, just a thin curtain of water running down the glass. "There's no one there, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're just tired." Grace finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. "He said he's coming inside." I forced a laugh, tried to brush it off. "Okay, Grace, it's bedtime." But she didn't move, didn't even look at me. "He's already inside," she whispered. My skin prickled. "Grace, what do you mean?" She pointed to the hallway with her finger trembling. "He's standing right there." I swallowed, my throat dry. The hallway was dark. The only light was coming from the living room. I stared into the shadows, expecting to see something, but there was nothing. Just the coat rack, a few hanging jackets, and the closed door to the guest room. "Grace," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "There's no one there." She blinked, her eyes glassy. "You're not supposed to talk to him." I felt my stomach twist. "Why not?" She leaned in closer, her breath warm against my ear. "Because he doesn't like it when you see him." I managed to get Grace to bed after that. She didn't find me, didn't argue. Just climbed under the covers and lay there, staring at the ceiling with those dark, unblinking eyes. I sat in the living room, TV off, lights on, nerves shot. The rain was still pounding against the windows and the wind howling through the cracks. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every time I glanced down the hallway, it felt wrong. Too dark, too quiet. And every time I looked away, I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me. An hour passed, then another. The rain finally eased, and the house fell into heavy silence. That's when I heard it. I sat up, my pulse hammering. The footsteps stopped just outside the living room. I could feel someone standing there, just out of sight. "Grace," I called, my voice shaking. "Is that you?" No answer, just the creak of floorboards shifting under unseen weight. I reached for my phone, but it was dead, battery drained. The charger was in the kitchen, past the hallway, past the footsteps. I sat there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway. The air felt heavy, like the room was holding its breath. Then, slowly, the footsteps started again. This time, they were moving away, back down the hall, towards Grace's room. forced myself to stand, legs shaking. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a lamp, and edged toward the hallway. It was pitch dark, the air thick and still. The guest room door was slightly open now. I stepped closer, listening. There was a sound coming from inside, a soft, wet whispering, like someone breathing against the wall. I pushed the door open wider. The room was empty. Just the bed, the closet, and the window. The window was open. Rain dripped from the sill, pooling onto the hardwood floor. The room was freezing, the air sharp and cold. I backed away, feeling like I was being watched. That's when I noticed something on the floor. Footprints. Wet, muddy footprints leading from the window to the bed, and then they stopped. They didn't go back to the window, they didn't go to the door, they just stopped, right beside the bed. I ran to Grace's room, flinging the door open. She was asleep, lying perfectly still, hands folded over her chest. But her eyes were open, wide, unblinking, staring straight at the ceiling. "Grace," I whispered, stepping closer. She didn't respond, just kept staring, and that's when I noticed her mouth. It was open, and she was smiling. A slow, too wide smile. Her teeth clenched so tight, they looked ready to crack. Her lips moved, just barely, and I leaned in to hear her whisper. "He says you saw him." I stepped back. "Grace, who did I see?" Her eyes shifted to meet mine, and for a moment, they weren't her eyes. They were black, empty, like twin voids. "You weren't supposed to see him," she said, her voice too low, too deep. "Now he's staying." The room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The air thickened, and the shadows in the corner grew darker, deeper. They stretched across the floor, pooling at my feet, and that's when I heard it. Soft, slow breathing, heavy and wet, right behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just grabbed Grace, pulled her out of bed, and ran. I drove straight to her mum's work, babbling about shadows and whispers and footprints that didn't go anywhere. She called me crazy, said I was scaring Grace. But Grace didn't say a word. She just sat in the back seat, staring out the window, smiling that too wide smile. I quit babysitting after that, but sometimes in the middle of the night, I wake up to the sound of slow, heavy breathing. It's always coming from the hallway. I'd been camping alone since I was a kid. I liked the isolation, the way the world felt simpler when it was just you and the trees. That's why I drove 3 hours into the woods, past the last gas station, and set up camp by the lake. No cell service, no distractions, just me, my tent, and the sounds of the forest. The first few days were perfect. I read, hiked, swam in the freezing water. But the third night was different. I woke up at 3 a.m. shivering. My sleeping bag was soaked. Cold, muddy water seeped through the fabric, chilling me to the bone. I sat up confused, and that's when I noticed it. The tent flap was unzipped, wide open. My boots, which I'd left inside, were gone. My flashlight was gone. The lantern I'd hung from the tent's roof was lying outside, half buried in mud. I couldn't remember leaving the tent, couldn't remember going outside, but my boots were missing, and my feet were covered in mud. I scrambled out of the tent, flashlight in hand, and scanned the area. The ground was churned up with footprints, my footprints, leading away from the tent and into the woods. I should have packed up and left right then, but I needed my boots, so I followed the trail. The footprints wound through the trees, deeper into the woods than I'd gone before. I could barely see in the dark, but the mud was soft and the prints were fresh. After a few minutes, I saw my flashlight lying in the middle of the trail. I picked it up. It was off but still warm, like someone had just been holding it. I kept walking, and and that's when I found the first item, my jacket. It was draped over a low branch, neatly folded, like someone had taken it off and placed it there deliberately. And then I saw the second item, my backpack. It was sitting on a rock, unzipped. I checked inside. Nothing was missing, but it was packed differently than how I'd left it. Items I never used, the first aid kit, a spare battery, were now on top, like someone had rummaged through it. I kept going, pushing through the underbrush, and that's when I saw it. Another tent. It was identical to mine, same colour, same size, but it was filthy. The fabric was sagging, the poles bent, and it smelled. The air around it was thick with the scent of mildew and rot. I stepped closer. The tent flap was partially open. I shined my flashlight inside. There was a sleeping bag, unzipped and damp, lying in the centre. A pile of muddy clothes was stacked beside it, clothes that looked just like mine. And then I saw them, my boots. They were lying side by side at the front of the sleeping bag, caked in mud, and when I bent down to pick them up, I heard it. I froze. The tent was empty. I could see the entire interior from where I stood, but the breathing continued. Slow, heavy, laboured. I swallowed, my mouth dry. Hello? The breathing stopped. The woods fell silent. I backed away, clutching the boots to my chest, and that's when I noticed something else. There was a line of rocks leading away from the tent, a perfect line, stretching deeper into the woods. I don't know why, but I followed it. The rocks were placed every few feet, and they were perfectly smooth, as if someone had taken the time to wash each one. The line led to a small clearing, and that's when I saw it. Another tent, identical to mine, identical to the first, but this one was worse, sagging, torn, covered in green moss and black mould. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. I stepped closer, heart pounding, and that's when the smell hit me. Wet herb, rotting leaves, and something else, something metallic. Blood. The tent flap was open, and inside I saw another sleeping bag. This one was zipped up tight, like it was hiding something inside. And there was a lump in the centre, a long, narrow lump that stretched from one end of the bag to the other. My flashlight flickered. I stepped back, and that's when I heard the humming again. Only this time, it was right behind me. I spun around, but the woods were empty, just trees and darkness. But the humming continued, circling me, drifting through the trees. I backed away, eyes locked on the tent. The lump inside the sleeping bag shifted, just slightly. I bolted. I ran through the woods, branches slapping my face, mud sucking at my boots. The humming followed me, weaving through the trees like it was everywhere at once. I didn't stop until I reached my campsite. The tent was still there, zipped up tight. My sleeping bag was dry, my backpack was where I'd left it. I shoved everything into the car and sped out of there, not stopping until I hit the highway. I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see something. I don't camp alone anymore. I don't camp at all, because every time I close my eyes, I hear that humming, and in my dreams, I'm back in those woods, standing outside that tent, and the zipper is slowly coming down. I moved into my new place last October. It was a top floor unit in a decent part of the city. Nothing fancy, but it was quiet, and I didn't share any walls, which was a big upgrade from my last place. The listing said it was a top floor apartment. What they didn't mention was that there was one more unit above me, kind of like a converted attic. It had its own door at the far end of the hall, tucked behind a stairwell I barely noticed in the first few times I walked past. I asked the landlord about it once. He just said, it's occupied, long-term tenant, keeps to himself. That's all I ever heard. started noticing weird things. I'd hear footsteps above me at odd hours, not pacing exactly, more like someone walking from one side of the room to the other, back and forth, always around 4 a.m. I assumed the guy worked nights or something, no big deal. But then I started noticing the pattern. It was always the same. 5 steps, pause, 5 steps back, every single time. It got under my skin in a way I can't explain. Like it wasn't the sound itself that was bothering me. It was the repetition, the precision, no variation. Like someone was practicing something over and over. I told myself I was being dramatic. Then I started hearing the sound of something being dragged, not loudly, but it wasn't consistent. Some nights it'd be 10 minutes, other nights it would go on for hours. One night I went up and knocked on the door. No answer. I waited a minute and knocked again. Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door and didn't hear a thing. No footsteps, no movement, just complete unnatural silence. Then, as I turned to leave, I thought I heard a breath. Not even a sound, just the pressure of someone exhaling quietly right on the other side. I didn't knock again. A few nights later, I found something in the hallway. A small piece of paper. No envelope, no handwriting. Just a hand-drawn square. A box, penciled in neatly, and inside it, a tiny circle. It looked like a room, a floor plan maybe. No explanation. I threw it away, but the next night there was another one. Same size, different shape. A rectangle this time, with a line bisecting it. I started saving them. They kept coming. Always at night, always placed perfectly at the centre of my door. After 2 weeks, I had 10 of them, all different. Some had strange symbols inside, others were just clean, architectural shapes, like diagrams. I asked my landlord again about the unit upstairs. He looked uncomfortable. Said the tenant had lived there for years, didn't talk to anyone, paid rent early, never caused issues. He told me he has some routines, but he's harmless. I showed him the drawings. He just stared at them and said, "That's strange," like he was trying not to say more. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. The footsteps were back. 5 steps, pause, 5 steps back, and that slow, dragging scrape. Then it stopped, suddenly. I didn't hear anything for almost 20 minutes. Then I heard my own name, whispered, not from above, from behind my front door. I sat on my couch, frozen. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. The whisper didn't come again. The next morning, there was no note. But the night after that, the drawing returned, and this time, it was my apartment. No doubt about it. The layout was exact. Even the furniture was sketched in. Couch, bed, desk, and in the corner of the drawing, there was a circle drawn over my bed. A small X inside it. I moved out 2 weeks later. I didn't even wait to break the lease. I left most of my stuff behind, told the landlord I had a family emergency and wouldn't be coming back. He didn't seem surprised. Before I left, I walked past that upstairs door one last time. There was something new taped to it. A sheet of paper folded into quarters. I don't know why I opened it. Inside was a detailed drawing of a human head. No hair, no face. Just an open cavity where the eyes should have been. And a note underneath it that simply said, "Now you're part of the pattern." When I moved into the neighbourhood, people avoided talking about the house at the end of the street. I didn't notice it at first. I was too focused on settling in, unpacking, dealing with the cable guy, getting my bearings. It was a quiet area, retired couples, middle-aged families, tidy lawns. The kind of place It looked fine from a distance. Brick, 2 stories, white siding, fenced yard. But every time I walked by it, something felt off. The air was colder, the windows always looked dark, no matter the time of day, and no one ever went in or out. One afternoon, I saw my neighbour, a woman named Arlene, tending to her garden. I asked her about number 58. She hesitated. Then she said, "It's better if you don't go near it." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't even smile. She told me the city had condemned the property years ago, some sort of issue with the foundation. But that didn't make sense, because the lawn was mowed, the hedges were trimmed, someone was clearly maintaining it, and yet, no cars, no trash bins, no mail. A few days later, I saw the front door open. It was just a crack, barely noticeable, but enough to confirm that someone was inside. I stood at the end of the driveway for a minute, debating. I should have walked away, I know that, but something about the house, the stillness of it pulled at me. I stepped up onto the porch. No noise, no birds, even the wind felt dead. I knocked lightly. Nothing. I called out, "Hello?" Still nothing. Then the door opened wider. I should have stopped there, turned around, but I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything changed. The air felt heavy, like I'd walked underwater. My ears popped, like pressure had dropped suddenly. The house was dark, but not pitch black, just dim, like it was stuck at permanent dusk. The hallway stretched further than it should have. From the outside, it looked like a normal-sized home, but from where I stood, the corridor went on for at least 30 or 40 feet, narrowing the further it went. I turned to leave. The door was gone. I was facing the same way. I hadn't turned around, but behind me was just another hallway. Same wallpaper, same dim light, no exit. I walked forward, trying doors. Each one opened into a room that didn't match the house. A classroom, a hospital ward, an airport lounge. All empty, all dead silent. The windows showed nothing, just a white void, like the world outside had been erased. In one room, I found a mirror. My reflection wasn't right. It was wearing my clothes, had my face, but the eyes stared too long, and when I blinked, it didn't. I slammed the door shut and kept moving. The house shifted around me, literally. I'd walk straight for what felt like minutes, then open a door and find myself back in the same hallway I started in. Once, I heard a voice, a whisper, from just behind my shoulder. It said, "You're here too early." I spun around. No one there. Eventually, I found a staircase. It led down, even though the house hadn't looked like it had a basement. The steps were wet, not damp, wet, like they'd been submerged recently. I held onto the railing and descended. At the bottom, there was a narrow hall, lit by a single bulb swinging from a cord. There were people down there. I could see them, not clearly, but in silhouette. They stood behind glass walls on either side of the hallway, just standing, staring. Some were crying, others looked confused. One of them pounded on the glass with both fists, but no sound came through. I didn't recognize any of them, except the last one. The last cell at the end of the hall had me inside. Not a copy, not a twin, me. Same clothes, same haircut, same everything, except that version of me looked older, tired, like he'd been trapped in there for months. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it, so I stepped closer. He mouthed it again. "Don't trust the exit." I turned. The hallway behind me had collapsed into a staircase. The bulb above flickered out. I ran. I don't remember much after that. Just cold air, the the sensation of falling, and a sudden, blinding light. I woke up on my lawn, face down, soaked, covered in mud. My phone said it was 3:07 a.m. I'd gone in at noon. I tried to tell people what happened. No one believed me, not even Arlene. She acted like she didn't remember our conversation about the house. But here's the worst part. When I walked past number 58 the next day, it was different. Not just cleaned up, rebuilt, new siding, fresh paint, different windows, as if the house had restructured itself. And in the upstairs window, I saw someone watching me. It looked like me, not older, not younger, just slightly off. I haven't walked that street since, and I've started locking my bedroom door at night. Not to keep anything out, but to keep me in. Because sometimes, when I pass a mirror at the wrong angle, I catch a glimpse of a hallway behind me that doesn't belong in this house. And I think I'm still in there, still trying to find the real way out. I didn't grow up with much family. Foster homes, couch hopping, that kind of thing. By the time I turned 22, I didn't have any real connections left. No one to call, no one to disappoint. I think that's why I took the job out on the farm. It wasn't even really a job, more like a favour. Some guy named Emery posted online that he needed someone to live in his cousin's old house for a while. Said it had been empty for years, needed a presence. Before it went to market, he'd cover the first 6 months of rent, no paperwork, no references. It was 3 hours from the nearest city, surrounded by open fields, a crumbling barn, and nothing else. Exactly what I wanted. I'd been trying to get away from everything, people, noise, responsibility. This felt like the reset button I needed. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The wallpaper was yellowed and peeling. There were cracks in the plaster, and mice had definitely made themselves at home. But I liked it. Something about the silence felt clean. Emery only stopped by once, a grey-haired guy with sunken eyes and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He handed me the key and said, "Just keep the place from falling apart," and left before I could ask any questions. I settled in quickly, cleaned, fixed a few things, slept well at first. But on the third night, I heard something. It sounded like shuffling, not inside, beneath, just under the floorboards. At first, I assumed it was mice or some animal that had gotten in. It wasn't frantic or skittering, it was slow, deliberate, like something dragging itself across wood. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to be one of those people who starts imagining things in an old house. But it didn't stop. It got worse. The footsteps began to mirror mine. If I walked into the living room, I'd hear something move in the grow space directly below. Always just a second behind me. Always matching my pace. Then came the smell. Wet dirt, rotting leaves, like a forest floor left to decay. It seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. I'd wake up gagging in the middle of the night with the smell so thick I could taste it. One morning, I found the cellar door open. It had been padlocked when I moved in. I hadn't touched it. The lock was broken. Inside the cellar was just a dirt floor, old tools, and a single wooden chair facing the far wall. Carved into the wall above the chair were tally marks, hundreds of them, all spaced neatly, all vertical. I locked the door again, blocked it with furniture. But that night, I heard the chair drag across the cellar floor. Not loud, just a scrape, then silence, like someone had sat down in it. Then came the dreams. In them, I'd be lying in bed, unable to move, as something climbed up from the floor. I couldn't see it, only feel it. The weight of it, the cold. It would lean over me, whispering something I couldn't understand, just inches from my face. Every time I woke up, My bedsheets were damp with dirt. Then the ledger appeared. I didn't find it. It wasn't there before. It just showed up on the kitchen table. It was old, leather-bound, pages worn thin and brittle. Inside were dozens of entries, all from different handwriting, but each dated in sequence, stretching back nearly 60 years. Each one described the same thing. Arrived at the house today. Emery said I just needed to stay here, keep it company. It's been quiet so far. The next entry, from the same hand. Heard footsteps last night, beneath the floor. I think it's waking up. Then more from different people. Something is in the field. Don't go out at night. Don't listen to the voice under the house. I asked its name. I shouldn't have. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before I moved in. It wants a vase. I slammed the book shut and threw it in the fireplace. It didn't burn. I left the house that night, slept in my car at the edge of the property. When I came back the next morning, all the lights were on, and every mirror, every one I had covered or stored away, had been uncovered. There was something wrong with my reflection. It looked just like me, but the eyes were too calm, the smile lingered too long, and when I turned away, I swear I saw it keep looking at me. The final straw came 2 nights later. I woke up around 3 a.m. I could hear the chair scraping again. I got up, grabbed a flashlight and opened the cellar. This time I went down. The smell was unbearable. The light flickered. I aimed it at the far wall. The chair was gone, but someone was standing in the corner, facing the wall. They didn't move when the light hit them. I whispered, "Who are you?" The figure slowly raised a hand and pointed at the wall. I looked. There, beneath hundreds of tally marks, was something new. My name, carved deep, fresh. When I turned back, the figure was gone. But beside me, I heard my own voice say, "You're ready now." I left that night and never went back. I didn't even pack. I didn't tell anyone. Emery never answered another call. When I looked into the house's history, there was no record of it. The land wasn't listed under any name. No deeds, no permits, nothing. I don't know what I stayed without there. I don't know what it was feeding, but I've stopped looking in mirrors because I don't always like what looks back. And sometimes, when I pass reflective glass, I catch a glimpse of something that still thinks it's me. I used to rent a storage unit on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, no climate control, just a row of metal doors with cheap padlocks. I used it mostly for tools and furniture I didn't want to keep in my apartment. The place was cheap, open 24 hours, and barely staffed. Just a single office at the front with a buzzer no one ever answered. The first time something weird happened, I brushed it off. I'd swung by on a Saturday afternoon to grab an old box of cables. As I unlocked my unit, I noticed the one across from me, Unit 109, had its lock hanging open. The door was cracked maybe an inch. I figured someone had just forgotten to secure it. Still, something felt off. It was silent inside, too silent. I thought I could hear someone breathing, but that might have just been my imagination. I didn't check, I just grabbed what I needed and left. Next time I came back, maybe 2 weeks later, 109 was still like that. Same lock, same slight crack in the door. That's when I told the woman in the office. She looked up the number and said that unit hadn't been rented in almost a year. That didn't make sense. The lock wasn't a facility issued one. It was a heavy duty aftermarket padlock. New. I asked if she'd check it, maybe call the owner. She said, "I'll note it," and never moved from her chair. That should have been enough for me to walk away, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, the next time I went back, around dusk, I brought a small flashlight. I told myself I'd just take a quick peek through the crack, nothing invasive, just see if it was empty or not. I knelt down and shined the light through the gap. There were boxes stacked neatly along the walls, a chair in the centre of the room, and something in the corner, a dark shape. At first, I thought it was a bag of clothes, but then it moved, just slightly. I stood up fast, heart beating so quick. I walked straight back to my car, trying not to run. I didn't go back for a while, but then, 3 weeks later, I got a call from the storage company. They said my unit had been broken into. Nothing was taken, but the lock had been cut clean through. I asked if there was camera footage. They said no, just damage, no theft. I drove down there that night. My stuff was untouched, nothing missing, just moved around, like someone had opened every box, unwrapped every item, and then carefully put it all back exactly where it was. I asked about 109 again. The woman at the desk avoided eye contact and said it had now been officially closed off. Maintenance issue, unsafe. I walked back to the row of units anyway. There was a new padlock on 109, a beefy one, but this time there was a tiny slit in the door frame, like someone had forced a gap. When I leaned in, I heard something that chilled me more than anything else I've ever experienced. Breathing, not laboured, not fast, just steady and close. That night, I dreamed someone was inside my apartment, standing in my closet, just breathing quietly. I woke up, drenched in sweat. My closet door was open. I sleepwalk sometimes. I told myself it was that. The next day, my landlord told me a neighbour had reported seeing someone hanging around my building late at night. Bald, wearing a grey hoodie, just standing near the fire escape, watching. I don't know what made me do it, but I checked the footage on a small security cam I'd installed in my apartment window months ago, a cheap one I'd used to catch a package thief once. At 3:16 a.m, the night before, there was a man standing in the middle of the street, staring up at my window, still, motionless, no vehicle nearby, no phone, just watching. His face was hard to see, the image was grainy, but his posture was off, like his arms were hanging a little too far forward. And he stayed there for 13 minutes, didn't move, didn't even shift his weight. I filed a police report. They took it down, but didn't seem concerned. That same week, I went back to the storage facility one last time. Unit 109 was wide open. No lock, no boxes, just the chair facing the entrance. On the chair was a folded piece of paper. No name on it, nothing on the outside. I picked it up. Inside, one sentence. You shouldn't have looked. I moved into the house on Evergreen Lane because it was cheap, dirt cheap. The landlord had told me it had been empty for a few years, but he didn't say why. I didn't ask. I just signed the lease, packed my stuff, and moved in. The first few days were fine. The place was old but sturdy, creaking floorboards, drafty windows, the usual. But one room stood out, the second bedroom. It was spotless, I mean, almost unnaturally clean. The walls were a pristine white, the floorboards gleamed as if someone had just polished them. The rest of the house was dusty and worn, but that room looked untouched, and had this faint, sweet smell, lemon polish. I didn't think much of it at first, just kept the door closed and used it for storage. Boxes of stuff I didn't need, bags of clothes I kept meaning to donate. But every time I walked past the door, I felt watched. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd been living alone for months now, and it was starting to get to me. I kept my routines, kept my head down, but at night, things started to change. The first night it happened, I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard it. A soft, creaking sound, like wood bending under pressure. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but it kept going. I sat up and strained to listen. The sound was coming from the empty room. My heart started to pound. It was just a storage room. There was nothing in there that could be making that noise. But the sound kept going. Creak, 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 slow and steady. I forced myself to get up, grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed, and crept down the hall. The door to the empty room was slightly ajar. A thin line of darkness stretched across the floor. I stood there for a moment, holding my breath. The creaking stopped. The room was silent. I pushed the door open, bracing myself for what? I didn't know. But the room was empty. Just my boxes and bags, all piled in the corner. And that smell, lemon polish, thick, cloying, so strong it made my eyes water. I flicked on the light. The room was spotless. The floorboards gleamed, reflecting the dim light like a mirror. I walked in, running my hand over the walls. Smooth, clean, no dust. And then I noticed it. The floorboards in the centre of the room weren't polished. They were scratched. Deep, circular gouges ran in tight, overlapping loops. Like someone had been dragging something back and forth, back and forth. I bent down, running my fingers over the grooves. They were fresh. The wood splinters were still sticking up. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just an old house. Old houses make noise. But the next night, the creaking started again. It was the same as before, slow and deliberate, like a rocking chair, only I didn't own a rocking chair. I grabbed my phone and started recording the sound, just to prove to myself I wasn't going crazy. I listened to the playback the next morning, and the creaking was there, but there was something else too. A soft, muffled voice. I played it back over and over, trying to make it out. It was faint, but there were words. A woman's voice, whispering something over and over. I amplified the audio, straining to make it out. It was just one word, repeated again and again. Help, 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 help. I dropped the phone and stared at the closed door. The scent of lemon polish was stronger now, seeping through the cracks, thickening the air. I couldn't stay in the house that night. I grabbed my keys and drove to my sister's place, slept on her couch. When I came back the next morning, the door to the empty room was wide open. Inside was a chair. It was old, wooden, with chipped blue paint. It sat dead centre in the room, facing the window, and it was rocking. I stepped inside, and that smell of lemon polish was suffocating. I tried to open the window to air it out, but it wouldn't budge. The glass was ice cold, like the room was sealed. The chair kept rocking, back and forth, back and forth. I walked closer, and that's when I saw the scratches. They weren't just in the centre of the room anymore. They stretched from the middle all the way to the walls, tight, desperate circles, as if someone had been spinning around and around in the chair for hours. I leaned down, tracing the grooves with my fingertips. They were deeper now, jagged and fresh, and that's when I saw it. A single fingernail, broken and splintered, wedged deep in the wood. I backed away, and that's when the chair stopped rocking, just stopped, dead still. The room was silent. I could hear my own breathing, sharp and quick, and then, from behind me, a voice whispered, "Help me." I spun around, but the room was empty, just the chair dead centre, facing the window. I ran out, slammed the door, and never went back inside. I moved out the next day. I literally left everything behind. When the landlord called to ask why I'd left, I told him. I told him about the creaking, the rocking chair, the voice, and he was quiet voice said. I guess you found it then. Found what? I asked. The chair, he said. I got rid of it years ago, burned it, but it keeps coming back. I hung up, my hands shaking. I never went back to the house, but sometimes in the middle of the night, I still hear it. Last summer, I took a road trip down the coast. I'd just gone through a breakup and needed to clear my head. I didn't plan it, just packed my car, booked a few random motels, and followed the shoreline south. One afternoon, I stopped at a gas station just outside a small fishing town, the kind of place that doesn't even show up on most maps. I asked the cashier if there was anywhere nearby to stretch my legs. She pointed up the road and said, "There's an old trail past the cliff bend. It's peaceful, just be respectful of the shrine." I asked what she meant. She just shrugged. "Locals don't mess with it, you'll see." I drove a few minutes further and found the trail entrance. There was no sign, just a narrow path in the trees. I followed it. About 10 minutes in, the trail opened up to a small clearing with a low stone altar built into the hillside. Moss covered, weathered. There were old offerings at the base, faded flowers, small candles, folded scraps of paper. It looked forgotten, but cared for in a quiet way. Above it, built into the stone, was a carved face. Not a saint, not a god I recognised, just a woman's face, worn down by time, but unmistakably watching. I'm not religious, but something about it made me pause. It didn't feel threatening, more patient. I stayed for a minute, took a breath, then turned to head back. That's when I saw her. A woman, maybe in her 60s, standing just at the edge of the trail. She wore a long blue coat. Her hair was white and tightly braided. She didn't speak, just smiled at me, small and polite. Then she nodded once and walked past me toward the shrine. I said, "Afternoon," and kept walking. Back at the parking area, I realised something. There'd only been one car there, mine. I should have gone home that night, but I didn't. Instead, I drove back the next day. Curiosity, I guess. The trail was there, the shrine was there, but something had changed. All the offerings were gone, cleared away. Even the moss had been stripped. The carved face had been scrubbed clean. The expression different now, harsher. There were fresh lines scratched into the stone around her eyes, like tears. I turned to leave, and the same woman was there again. Same coat, same braid, but this time she was standing much closer. Her face wasn't kind anymore, still calm, but cold, assessing. I muttered, "Sorry," without really knowing why, and backed away. I didn't look back. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. My hotel room was cold, colder than it should have been. My breath fogged in the air. The lights wouldn't turn on, the power was out. But when I turned toward the window, I saw her, the same woman, standing outside, 3 floors up, just looking in. Her face was pressed against the glass. No fear, no anger, just a slow, deliberate patience, like she'd done this before, like she'd wait. Then she lifted one hand and held up a folded slip of paper. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember jolting awake at sunrise, drenched in sweat. The window was locked from the inside, but there, on the nightstand, was the folded paper. Inside were 5 words. "You acknowledged what watches." I left the town an hour later. Didn't even check out, I just drove. The weird thing, ever since I've started noticing shrines. On roadsides, on hills, in woods. Tiny ones, no bigger than a mailbox. Same stone, same carved face, same offerings. Sometimes I'll see someone standing near one. Old women, always. Wearing They never speak, never move toward me, just watch. And if I look at them long enough, I start to feel it, like something is gently shifting inside my chest, like I've been marked. The deeper part of me, the part I don't say out loud, knows I invited it in, not by worshipping, not by mocking, just by seeing. I used to walk every night. I live in a pretty quiet area, rural, lots of fields, not much traffic. It's one of those towns where everyone kind of knows each other, but not well enough to call anyone a friend. I liked it that way, especially after dark, when the air got still and everything slowed down. There's a stretch of road about 2 miles from my house that curves through some old farmland. No lights, no houses, just trees on both sides, and a feeling that you're completely cut off from everything. I always took that road on my walks because it was peaceful. It felt untouched. One night, about a year ago, I went out a little later than usual, around 10:30. I'd had a weird day and needed to clear my head. It was cold, late autumn, and the sky was cloudless. You could see a breath in front of you and hear every step you took on the gravel. I didn't bring a flashlight, I usually don't, but the moon was bright enough that I didn't need one. About 15 minutes into the walk, I noticed something up ahead. It looked like a dog, sitting perfectly still in the centre of the road, facing the direction I was walking from. At first, I figured it was just someone's stray, or maybe a neighbour's dog that had wandered off. That's not unusual out here, but as I got closer, I noticed 2 things. One, it wasn't moving, not a twitch, not even the way a dog might turn its head or shift its weight when someone gets near. 2, its ears were wrong. They weren't floppy or pointed. They were short and rounded, like they'd been cut. Its body looked off too square, too stiff. I slowed down, maybe 20 feet away. "Hey buddy," I said, not really expecting a response. Nothing. It just sat there, facing me now. Its head turned slightly, very slowly, like it was registering me for the first time. The eyes didn't glow like most animals in the dark. They were just black and dull, almost like they were set too deep into the skull. Still, it didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't do anything, just watched. I took a step to the side, meaning to go around it and keep walking. It stood up, not fast, just smooth, like it had been waiting for me to make a move. I froze. I remember very clearly thinking, this thing isn't right. Its legs were too long, its back was too straight, and the way it stood, I don't know how else to put it. It looked like it was trying to remember how to move like a dog. I took a step back. It took one forward. I turned around and started walking back the way I came, calmly at first, pretending like I wasn't bothered. I didn't want to trigger it, whatever it was. But when I glanced back, it had followed, still keeping pace, still silent, still watching. That's when I noticed something worse. There was another one, on the edge of the tree line, to my left, barely visible. Same build, same stillness. It wasn't watching me, it was watching the first one. And when I turned my head a little more, I saw a third shape across the road, also near the trees. They were forming a kind of loose triangle around me. None of them moved, not until I stopped walking. Then they all took a single step forward, in sync, no noise. I started walking faster, and they matched it. I broke into a jog, no footsteps behind me, just the crunch of gravel under my own shoes, and the rising sound of my pulse in my ears. When I hit the bend in the road, I looked back. They were gone, all 3. No sign of them, no eyes in the dark, nothing. I don't know how I made it home that night, but I locked every door, every window. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the living room with the lights on, shaking. I wasn't even scared, not in the usual way. It felt more like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that didn't quite know how to be what it was pretending to be. The next morning, I went back. In daylight, the road looked completely normal. No prints, no fur, no broken branches. But at the exact spot where the first one had been sitting, I found something. A dead rabbit, laid out perfectly in the centre of the road. Its eyes had been removed, not eaten, just missing. No blood, no trauma, like they'd been scooped clean. I haven't walked at night since, but sometimes when I'm driving that road late, windows up, doors locked, I'll catch a glimpse of movement just past the trees, and I swear to God it's not deer. It's waiting, watching, remembering me. Well, that concludes today's Scary Reddit stories. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this creepy journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please also leave your own spooky